The Enterprise D is the first ever Star Trek LEGO set and the canon flagship of the United Federation of Planets. That's cool and all, but the ultimate measure of awesomeness for a LEGO spaceship is not the groundbreaking nature of the set. It's not the piece count. It's not even the ship's place in the lore. It's the answer to one question. Is it swooshable? Welcome to Swooshability Index. Here we believe that spaceships are built to be played with, and that the greatest honor you can give a ship is to swoosh it. But since we're also Galaxy-class nerds, that means evaluating each ship for swooshability using the completely unpatented, but also completely awesome Swooshability Index. So what makes a spaceship swooshable? Swooshability can basically be crystallized into three main components: optics, grip, and stability, each to which we'll assign a point value to add up at the end. In seeing how big this set is, I was pretty skeptical when I heard people saying it was swooshable. Let's jump into each of those and see how the Enterprise D measures up. Engage! First up is optics, or more simply, how cool does it look? We're going to look at it in two different ways. First, touchdown. First of all, the Enterprise is not built at all for landing, either in the lore or as a set. Thankfully, the set comes with a pretty slick stand. Although it doesn't actually touch the ground, the display stand is built in such a way and at such a pleasing angle that you can just stare at this thing for a long time. It feels a little bit like cheating, but I'm going to go ahead and give this 2 points for when it's touched down. However, this channel is not called the Landability Index. We want to know how this thing looks while it's flying. Here, the Enterprise really delivers. The Enterprise is beautiful. Whether the ship is flying by you or you're flying by the ship, it just looks good. I'm going to give this one a full 2 points as well. Second, and probably the most important evaluation, where do you hold this thing? The trick with the Enterprise is that it's just kind of awkward. It wasn't built to be handled so much, and the combination of this ship's enormous size plus its strange composition, the exact thing that makes it interesting to look at, makes it kind of difficult to hold. Thankfully, the instruction book has us covered on this one and shows us where to pick up the Enterprise. And I can tell you from experience that those points are probably the best options, and the ones that they explicitly tell you not to pick up with are terrible. You will not successfully pick up the Enterprise on the warp nacelles, on the edges of the saucer, or more or less anywhere else. I have tried a lot of configurations, such as these, and they just don't work that great. I'm going to give this 1 point, but it's 1 point with a little bit of hesitation, because the specific points that they recommend picking up by work all right. The one on the star drive section is just fine, but the whole point on the saucer is weirdly a little bit fragile. They added a cool little detail of the captain's yacht on the bottom of the saucer, but unfortunately, it's the most delicate piece of the entire ship. And so where they ask you to pick it up, you are, if you are not careful, likely going to knock that piece directly off the set almost instantaneously. Now, I do want to explain what I mean by a 1. I developed the Swooshability Index as a 3-point scale for simplicity's sake. So when I rate something as a 2, that means it is the best there is. When I rate it a 1, it's perfectly adequate, but nothing special. If it's a 0, it's just simply not great. And with that recorded in our captain's log, let's move on. Grip size universality. Now, a good grip is highly dependent on your hand size, and I have pretty big hands. Okay, maybe not quite that big, but the point is, a good grip for me is going to be different than a grip for someone else. My hands fit in the ideal grip position without too much trouble. In the other spots on the ship, not so much, but the primary point from which I would swoosh it, and the one recommended by the instructions, is a good fit for an adult hand. Since kids are best at playing, we should really take a look at this in context of a child's hand and not just an adult's hand. Thankfully, I happen to have a child's hand available. Thanks, child's hand. The child's hand I consulted for this project told me that This can't really be gripped by a child-sized hand. Instead, it rests on top of the hands, so there's not really an option to grip it in a way that allows for maneuvers, because it's just sitting on top, and you're basically stuck with it upright like it is in the show. The child's hand gave this a 1 in grip universality, which might be a little generous, but I won't dispute with the experts. Next is heft. This thing is massive, and it's heavy. You can lift it up. Well, it takes the stand with it sometimes. You can lift it up without too much trouble, but when you start trying to balance it around in a kind of a different way than it's designed to, than you're instructed to in the Starfleet manual, it gets a little bit unwieldy. The heft certainly gives it gravitas, but it's kind of hard to maneuver. I'm going to call this fine and give it a 1. The last point in the grip category is balance, or what do we do with all of the heft of this ship? When you are using the indicated grip points, this is a pretty well-balanced ship. You don't feel like it's going to tip in one direction or another. Due to the amount of weight of the ship, you don't want to get too wild and reckless with it, but it's symmetrical as you can see, so the side-to-side balance is pretty good. And the forward-to-back balance is actually pretty good as well, though it does lean a little bit heavier forward. I will say, though, that the standout part of this set in terms of balance is the stand. This is the unsung hero of the experience because in your hands, it does get heavy after a little while. But the stand itself is built in such a way to not only display in a very sturdy way the model in its completion, but also to carry the model with the saucer separated in a way that does not tip, which is remarkable given the amount of weight in the saucer alone, which I'll show you here. When you remove the saucer, voila, it stays up. It's not leaning too far backward, even though it clearly was doing fine with the saucer on. And when you put the saucer back on, you recognize that this thing was built to display the entire ship. So if I were to crystallize this down, I'm going to give the entire ship a 1, but if it was just the stand, I would give it a 2. Third is stability, or more specifically, can it handle swooshing without breaking? There's 3 components to this, the first of which is liftoff integrity. With the interesting grip situation, you have to be pretty precise in your placement, but it can be picked up without too much trouble besides the bottom of the saucer section. It does stay together as you lift it off, as long as you lift it in the right spot. And so here, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 2. The next point is reorientability, or can you swoosh this in different ways and in different directions? I'm going to give some credit where credit is due here. This ship is built far more sturdily than I would have thought, given the fantastical profile and accuracy to the source material. And, at first attempt, it seems like you're actually getting away with reorienting it in near any angle. You may have even seen other YouTubers trying this. It feels scary, but you can even hold it upside down without a warp core breach. I imagine that with custom stands, you could probably display it at angles other than the prime directive. However, it comes at an unforeseen price. Like I previously mentioned, this thing is not only heavy, it seems to gradually come apart under its own weight. And unless you're providing some preventative maintenance between maneuvers, you start to weaken the structure over time, which you'll see the result of in the final point. This one gets 1 point. Next is the G-force endurance, which is kind of a combination of everything we've talked about so far. You have to be able to pick it up. You have to know where to do that. It has to be able to tilt side to side. And then it has to be able to endure the force of being swooshed around. It has to be able to survive swooshing. Red alert! Here is where we pay the piper. As you may have discerned from my very subtle foreshadowing earlier, when you move the Enterprise in a way, in a direction, and with a force that the designers never intended, we start to lose structural integrity. I actually reshot this part of the video thinking that I had been too pessimistic and wanting to give it another shot. But To my dismay, but also vindication, I found that as I had begun to operate it, how some of these other reviewers had been operating it, I found not my dreaded saucer separation, but that the star drive itself had begun to separate. The Enterprise D, unfortunately, really just can't survive a lot when it comes to G-force. If you're using it exclusively as a display model, that's not an issue. But if you're trying to swoosh it, well, I'm going to give this one 0 points because I'm afraid whenever I try it. So let's put everything together and get our grand total. With a perfect 4 out of 4 points in optics, a much lower 4 out of 8 points in grip, and only 3 out of 6 points in stability, the Enterprise lands on a total of 11 out of 18 on the Swooshability Index, which is solidly in the mediocre range. That said, I'm still going to swoosh it. The Enterprise D really did surprise me. I was predisposed going into this review thinking that it would be the worst ship that I'd ever tried to swoosh, but it turned out to be a lot more stable than I expected, especially for a ship of this size. So while it's not a great swoosher, it really is a cool set. In any case, thanks for joining me today and sticking it out through this very serious take on a very childlike matter. Now go find yourself a spaceship and swoosh it. All right, I think that's enough. Can you swoosh this? So what makes a spaceship